So if you eliminate all those things, there's kind of not much that would cause a TV network to shut down overnight. A $1 billion, enterprise that has been built up over 15 years, and no mumblings of, hey, we might be back in a week. Like if they were just closing down for a minute to restructure or to deal with loss of staff or something, they would have said to their prime stars, hey, hang in there. We might recreate this. We might have you back. Trust me, I talked to the executives. There was none of that. They were like, it is over. And to me, I don't see any way that happens unless it's sanctions, unless they are told by a higher power.
Lee Camp, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, thank you so much for being back on. I really do appreciate it. I do wish that it was under better circumstances. And, I feel really bad about the deplatforming that you have just recently gone through. But what's kind of crazy from my perspective is a couple months ago, I had Ben Norton on the show, and I actually specifically asked him a question about if we did see another military conflict, because we haven't seen really a large scale conflict since the Iraq war, since before the Twitter and Facebook days.
You mean, well, we've seen... You mean from Russia? We've seen plenty of massive military conflicts. We've killed 370,000 in Yemen alone.
True. But I guess what I asked him was, if we saw something like this break out, would we see the anti-imperialist left get deplatformed? And, I mentioned a few names, and yours was one of the names that I mentioned. And he said, yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, that is what happened. You were completely deplatformed over the last week or two. So I just wanted to start off going over the timeline of exactly what happened. How were you deplatformed? How were you kind of informed about what was happening? And again, just kind of run us through what happened day by day.
Sure. Yeah. And for those who don't know, I do a comedy news show called Redacted Tonight. It's on RT America. I created it, host it, and write my own words myself for 8 years and 375 some episodes. And it's anti-war, anti-imperialist, anti-corporate America, or it was. So that's who I am and what I do. But last week, basically we got an announcement at RT America. So RT America has a lot of shows. I'm one of them, but there's kind of two halves to it, just like Fox News or something. There's the opinion, personality side, and there's the news division. And we're both in the same studios in DC. They have studios elsewhere, but those were their main ones. And we were told Wednesday that nothing was filming, not RT News or anything. And then we basically had an all hands meeting on Thursday where they said, everything's done. It's all over. See you later. You can have a coffee mug on the way out. And, it was shocking, but I think, people have theorized, or mainstream media likes to say, oh, RT America just chose to shut down because there's been a lot of pushback against Russia. And I think that theory or view is garbage. I think that you could have seen RT America continue to operate for at least months, if not, a year or whatever, on the amount of money that was already in the pipeline for the budgets, the amount of staff, even if they needed to cut back some shows, I think they would have kept going. But instead, it was just instantaneously ended, which makes me think that it was probably U.S. sanctions in some regard or another. I don't know if the executives feared that they could be arrested under new sanctions. I don't know if the literally they couldn't spend $1 under new sanctions. I don't know, but it was instantaneous, and it was also for me personally, it was cross-platform. So my TV show is canceled. The YouTube videos of Redacted Tonight are banned. I believe they're still banned in Europe and UK. And my personal podcast, Moment of Clarity, was deleted from Spotify. It all happened within 3 days. And, something else people should know if they've never heard of my stuff is, as I said, I'm anti-war, meaning I'm anti this war. I'm anti-Russian invasion, but I also refuse to look at this without any context. The U.S. has pushed steadily under Russia's borders with missiles, with the expansion of NATO, with neo-Nazi-backed coup in Ukraine. And Russia had warned that there were red lines for months, if not years, and we crossed all the red lines. We and our puppet government in Ukraine. So you can understand the context of things and still not support a war. I don't support war. So yes, that is my view of things, and I was allowed to say that on RT America.
Yeah, and I think that's really the big distinction between, what I would call left Inc. or the Mick left, the fake imperialist left and anti-imperialist folks, is that the anti-imperialist left gives some context to what's happened and kind of shows how imperialism has led to all of these negative things. Even going back to the 1996 election, which the US interfered in Russia's election, which led to Vladimir Putin coming to power. So had the US not interfered in Russia's election in 1986, Vladimir Putin may not even have ever become president of Russia. But
we considered Yeltsin our boy in Russia. Yeah.
But, I just find this so unfortunate because, the last time I had you on, we were actually discussing the Mueller hearings, and, you were really outspoken against Russiagate and against neo-McCarthyism, and saying, for years that, we're having gradually more and more neo-McCarthyism. And now you have really become the victim of that, where you've lost 2 shows in the span of a week. So, I mean, just on a personal note, I mean, isn't that very frustrating that you've kind of been warning about this, and now you've really been hit with it full force?
Well, not to toot my own horn, as the expression goes, but I've been right about a lot of things. It's funny, once you actually analyze the reality of the situation, the reality of what the U.S. government does, the reality of our empire, you can see the writing on the wall for a lot of things. And, I've been right about climate change, right about, Occupy and the wealth in the top 1%, right about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. There's so many levels, and it's not that I'm some kind of genius. It's just that you have to stop watching the mainstream media propaganda and actually look at reality for what it is. And I had said, even though I despise Alex Jones, he was kind of the test balloon for cross-platform censorship and deplatforming. And I said at the time, when they deleted him from all the social media platforms, that despite the fact that I hate him or hate many of his ideas, I saw it as very dangerous, because I knew that it would not stop at him. It does not stop at the first one. It is then used largely against the left, against those speaking out against empire, against the corporate state. That's how it's been largely used. And yes, there are some, great examples of the far right, like Nazis being deleted from these platforms, but it never ends with just the initial one when you're getting into censorship. Now, I'm okay when it's someone who is literally promoting violence, go out there and harm people. But beyond that, it's very dangerous to start censoring ideas. And we're seeing that now. And I was exactly right that Alex Jones was just the beginning of it. And then a couple of years ago was a big purge of pages off of Facebook, including
there are a couple, I believe, wasn't? I mean, there was like waves of just like hundreds of pages getting deleted at once.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big ones, I believe it was 800 pages at once, that included Free Thought Project, Police the Police, antiwar.com, etc. And many of those are just anti, they shined a light on police brutality, let's say, or on the military-industrial complex. And not only were they deleted, but simultaneously, all of the editors were suspended from Twitter. So that is a cross-platform analysis and discussion that needed to happen. Like, these are big tech platforms that are normally enemies. They're adversaries. Facebook doesn't like Twitter. Facebook views Twitter as a kind of competitor. And yet they got together and said, these people and the people that work for these pages, we will delete them simultaneously. And it shows an incredible level and sophistication of censorship. And then, of course, there's been the stuff people talk about a lot less, which is shadow banning, which, I've been shadow banned on Facebook since 2016, 330,000 followers on my Facebook page. And, they show my post to about 9 people now. So you're lucky if you're one of the 9 out of the 330,000. So the shadow banning has been incredibly aggressive. And I think people need to pay attention to this and need to see that there's a reason these viewpoints, the viewpoints I espouse, are canceled, are shut down. It is because it's dangerous to the permanent war state. It's dangerous to the military-industrial complex. It's dangerous to the capitalist class that is exploiting and extracting what's left of America as workers and people struggle across the entire country.
And as far as the coordination, what I think that suggests, because again, there are specific pages or individuals who get deplatformed at the same exact time across different platforms. And, we've seen politicians, and I believe even, the White House has alluded to the fact that they've asked social media companies to clamp down on folks. It seems as though there is collusion with the government, where the government is directing these social media giants to deplatform folks. So, I mean, doesn't this become a free speech issue, a First Amendment issue?
Well, yeah, and I feel like you can take the word "seem" out of those sentences, because Facebook has announced years ago, a couple of years ago, that they were bringing on the Atlantic Council to decide what is truth, to help them, quote unquote, fact check. Well, the Atlantic Council is, a U.S. government agency essentially, and so the link with the U.S. government is pretty obvious. In many ways, some of the initial funding for Google came from the CIA's venture capital arm. So yeah, these links are very obvious. And even if they weren't straight up linked, you have just the fear, the threat of they're going to break them up, or they're going to harm their business, which has been done against Facebook we've seen it over the past 5 years. Basically, they've been attacked by the federal government, and I'm not going to defend Facebook. There's plenty about them I hate as well, but they've been attacked by the federal government and said, we're going to break you up if you don't censor all these pages. So they're going along with whatever the government wants in terms of what needs to be censored.
So don't you think this could result in a legal case, a Supreme Court case, if the government is directing social media companies to silence American citizens?
I mean, yes, I'd like to see a legal case, but as we've seen with our criminal justice system, or really our criminal space justice system, we've seen that they, at the end of the day, and especially in times of war, they will side with the imperial class, the imperial state. So I would be surprised if at the end of the day, the criminal justice system says, yeah, government, you need to bring back all of these voices that oppose your empire. But I certainly would support the effort. I just think it's unlikely.
Even from the perspective, of somebody who's an establishment apologist, I think that they still should be concerned, because we've been seeing, a gradual trend over the years to deplatform more and more folks, persecute more folks like Julian Assange, where any kind of heretic outside voice now is just being completely shut out, and there's a real unwillingness to question presuppositions, or just think outside the box generally. And I think that Western society is getting to a very dangerous place where you're only allowed to think one way, which is kind of ironic, right? Because we're saying that we're standing up against authoritarianism, right? Because now that communism doesn't exist, we're against authoritarianism. Yet we are getting much more authoritarian, especially in regards to censorship.
Yeah, and you mentioned Assange. Assange is incredibly harmful to journalism, has a chilling effect on all of journalism and all of publication of thoughts and ideas, not just because of what he stood for, but for the fact that WikiLeaks and Assange never published anything false. Everything they ever, that excuse can't even be used against them. It'd be one thing to shut down Fox News because, they claim to be news and they're publishing garbage that is not true at all. I'd have my own arguments about that, but it's a whole other thing to be like, this guy's published nothing but the truth. Every word ever published on WikiLeaks has been proven accurate 100%. And you cannot say that for any news outlet, any channel that has ever existed. Yet you can say that about WikiLeaks. And for that really is what made him the most dangerous, because nothing could be questioned about what he was revealing. And it revealed the crimes, not just of the U.S. government. And people like to think he was just anti-U.S. He revealed the crimes of governments around the world, of Russia, of China, of Peru, of Australia, of Britain, of big banks around the world, of so many of the ruling elite have their dirty laundry shown to the world, which should be useful if you want to have a legitimate democracy. But we now know the American empire has no interest in having a legitimate democracy. They want people as dumbed down as possible. They don't even want people to know what's really happening right now in Ukraine and Russia. And, you know, you can be opposed to Putin invading Russia and also be smart enough to understand how we ended up in this situation.
Are you worried that there's going to be even more censorship where you could wake up tomorrow and your YouTube channel, your Facebook page, your Twitter account are all deleted?
Sure, I'm worried about that. I'm trying to create a Patreon right now, patreon.com/Lee Camp, to try and build back what I've lost over the past week. Yeah, I'm nervous about that. But, you know, it's funny that the shadow banning and the suppression has been going on for so long, several years now, that I don't have an expectation anymore that my pages are going to be, my posts are going to be shown to many people. I used to be, you know, doing quite well. My videos on YouTube many of them would go viral to some extent. And in the past several years, I've seen none of that. So I guess, when you just slowly have the waves of suppression beat you down over many years, you aren't surprised anymore. You know, I'm not like, oh my God, they didn't show my YouTube video to nobody. I kind of expect that it's going to be heavily suppressed. And it's hilarious in this time of where people talk about cancel culture, people talk about having platforms deleted. And as a comedian, I guess I'm a comedian and journalist. I kind of put the two together. But as a comedian, I think that I may be the most suppressed, most canceled comedian in America who hasn't sexually assaulted anyone. The others that have truly lost their platforms, you know, like Bill Cosby, have done horrific sexual crimes. Whereas for me, it's just the fact that I'm anti-war, anti-imperial, and anti-corporate America. And that for a comedian is far more dangerous than to be, you know, anti-trans like Dave Chappelle, who, you know, you can say, oh, Dave Chappelle's being canceled. He's on the largest platforms in the world. He's getting paid $100 million to do his specials. You know, these people are not actually canceled. What's actually edgy is for a comedian to stand up against the ruling corporate class.
And I think, you know, you show that with Spotify in particular, right? Because we just had this big controversy with Joe Rogan and Spotify and, you know, his COVID disinformation, but they had no qualms seemingly about getting rid of your show.
Yeah, exactly. There was a big uproar about Joe Rogan, but he's still there, still has one of the largest platforms in the world, maybe the largest podcast on the entire globe. And meanwhile, my podcast that was not getting all that many, you know, listens. It wasn't really my focus, but I would like for it to continue to be there, deleted from Spotify. So that shows you apparently a tiny podcast that is going against corporate America is more dangerous than a massive podcast that largely, you know, with the exception of a few sentences here and there, is not really going after the power structures of our country.
So besides Patreon, are you looking at other platforms? Like, are you going to be trying to migrate over to Rumble or Rockfin or just, I mean, that seems to be what Alex Jones and some other folks who have been deplatformed have do is they've built up followings on other platforms, or they've created their own streaming services even.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be looking at other platforms. I would like to create, you know, something pretty independent though. So I'm not saying that it couldn't be funded by a platform or something like that, but it would have to be essentially full independence, because I had amazing freedom at RT America. I wrote all my own words. I researched all my own stuff, came up with my own topics, was never told to say anything or not to say anything, and was never censored. And that type of freedom is almost unheard of on your mainstream airwaves or really your television airwaves. And so, yeah, I'd have to find something like that again. And for now, hopefully I can get enough members on this Patreon that I can create something. It won't be Redacted Tonight, but hopefully it'll fill that void in the discussion in our country and in my heart.
Well, speaking of Patreon, I actually do have several different patron questions. I know we only have about 10 minutes left, but hopefully we can get through most of these. So the first one says, will you consider taking the time to learn Adobe Premiere to become independent of funding and start making documentaries, one for each topic? This is something I hope all YouTubers start doing. Lengthy videos with talking and interviews are great, but to have a chance to reach the masses, good documentaries is what we need.
Well, I like the sentiment. I'm thinking this guy must be a representative for Adobe Premiere, but he's a sales rep at Adobe. The end of that question was for the low price of I used to have I still do videos on YouTube, but they're live stream now. I used to do Moment of Clarity videos where there was a little bit of editing, and so I used to edit them myself. I have no problem learning that stuff and doing that stuff, which can be done fairly easily now. But the amount of effort and research and writing that a show like Redacted Tonight involves, if I'm going to be that side of things, then I can't also be doing all the editing and everything. But in terms of longer, well-produced documentaries, I'm all for it. I don't view myself as a documentarian. I think Redacted Tonight was the type of show I am best suited for with my comedy and my writing and everything else. The other thing is that, we do live in a culture that is just so breakneck speed in terms of news cycles. And, nothing seems to last more than a week. It's a real goldfish mentality. I mean, how many people are trying to cancel Joe Rogan right now, considering 2 weeks ago they said that was all anyone cared about.
Right.
But
I don't think anybody remembers anything before 2 weeks ago.
I know, exactly. So the question is how to get documentaries to break through in that type of news cycle. And, I'm sure there's people better suited for figuring that out than me.
Next question says, BitTorrent is a file sharing system that cannot be censored. As anti-imperialists are facing increasing censorship, they're moving to BitTorrent seems to be a stable way to protect their platforms. Have you ever considered distributing on BitTorrent?
I haven't looked into it, but I am a fan of these kind of uncensorable platforms. One that's being created right now is called Panquake, which looks a little bit like Twitter, but is on the blockchain and would largely be uncensorable. And so, yeah, there are definite good platforms out there that can't be censored. And I think we have to build up the alternatives as we continue to use the tools that have been given to us that can be used for activism and for raising awareness. So, I don't say delete your Twitter account right now, because it's still, despite all the suppression, despite all the censorship, it's still one of the most massive tools for creating awareness and activism. So I say use the tools given to us while creating the alternatives. And I'm not a coder, so I'm not going to be the one creating those platforms, but I sure hope someone does.
All right, this next one's a little long, so forgive me as I stumble through it. Sudden withdrawal from Afghanistan to focus on NATO and weakening capitalist Russia's alliance with China. Sudden withdrawal from Afghanistan was to focus on NATO trap in Ukraine for Putin, a repeat of Brzezinski's approach of financing and arming resistance that created Al-Qaeda. The 2014 coup against democratically elected Ukraine government, Russiagate's immense and lunatic hoax concocted by the deep state, NATO relentless expansion, including Ukraine and Georgia, all three are very closely connected and components of US bipartisan war party strategy for continuing US world dominance. US will fight to the last Ukrainian to weaken capitalist Russia and its alliance with China. The same lying team and key psychopathic players. So this isn't really a question, I guess, but any thoughts on that?
It's all 100% accurate. I mean, that first sentence about withdrawing from Afghanistan to focus on Ukraine, the U.S. military-industrial complex can do both. I don't think that's why they withdrew from Afghanistan. I think that they just realized that we could continue to destroy Afghanistan economically without having troops on the ground there, without having troops getting killed there. So I don't know that, we it's not like we stopped harming Afghanistan. We are probably killing more, or definitely killing more people now with economic war on them than with the troops there. But all the rest of it, I agree with. It's yes, this is a geopolitical attempt by the United States to maintain our control, maintain our empire against the growing economies of Russia and China and the growing alliance of Russia and China. And
well, it seems like it's pushing them closer together. I mean, they keep saying, NATO is stronger than ever before, but it seems as though the Russia-China alliance is stronger than it has been in 70 years.
Yeah, I'd say they are pushing them closer together. And I think the Brzezinski analysis is correct that our military-industrial complex, these psychopaths, want to get Russia bogged down in, another Vietnam, or their version of Vietnam, which is also what Brzezinski called Afghanistan initially. When it was Russia there and not the U.S. As their Vietnam, and they want to get them bogged down in kind of an endless firefight in Afghanistan that just hurts them economically, both because they're there and because of sanctions, and just is painful and draws things out. But of course, who does that harm the most? It harms Ukrainians. It harms innocent civilians. It is a disgusting tactic to try and harm Russia just by creating endless death in Ukraine, which is hilarious because if you watch all your mainstream media and you watch speeches by Biden and the rest, you'd think, oh, they care so much about Ukrainian civilians. That's all they care about right now. But in reality, their plan is to basically use Ukrainian civilians as cannon fodder for, maybe years to come.
So next question is, what evidence do you have to RT America being folded due to some kind of US government sanction or threat, other than the speculative thoughts you have shared on Redacted Tonight? And what have you or your staff done to determine the causes for RT America ceasing operations?
Yeah, so for one thing, I don't have any staff anymore. So at the moment they shut down, there is no Redacted Tonight, there is no staff. Yeah, no, I've admitted it's speculation. I've said that multiple times. They did not pull me aside and say, hey, top secret, here's what happened to RT America. I have said this is what I think happened. And I can say that I know that they were not out of money. So it's not like, hey, today we have to stop because we don't have a dime. I know they weren't out of staff. Yes, some staff had quit, but they could have shrunk their projects, their shows down to a minimum number. They could have had just RT News going. And easily done it with the staff they had there, plenty of staff. And so if it's not those things, they lost DirecTV as their distributor. Yeah, but they were still viewed by millions online and on other locations, portable.tv, etc. So it wasn't lack of viewers. So if you eliminate all those things, there's kind of not much that would cause a TV network to shut down overnight. $1 billion enterprise that has been built up over 15 years, and no mumblings of, hey, we might be back in a week. Like if they were just closing down for a minute to restructure or to deal with loss of staff or something, they would have said to their prime stars, hey, hang in there. We might recreate this. We might have you back. Trust me, I talked to the executives. There was none of that. They were like, it is over. And to me, I don't see any way that happens unless it's sanctions, unless they are told by a higher power, like the Lord Almighty that I don't believe in. If they were told, look, this is over. Well, so what are the higher powers that could do that? It's pretty much just U.S. government.
So I do have a few more questions. I don't know if you have just a few minutes left.
Yeah, I could do 5 more minutes. Sure.
Okay. John McCarthy in Chicago asks, one upside of you not working for RT anymore is that now there is nothing preventing you from running for office. The People's Party needs candidates. What do you think?
Oh, God. I do not want to be a politician. I want to make jokes and spread the truth via humor. So yeah, not dying to be a politician.
Next one says, I really want to support Lee on Patreon, but I'm currently stretched quite thin. Has he considered a $1 or $2 tier for patrons who just want to give him, but don't need premium paywalled content?
Well, that's very nice of him. And I've said to people, you know, if you are stretched thin, please do not donate. I'm not, I'm not looking for someone to not be able to feed their cat because they want to see a video of mine. So far, almost every video that's on Patreon is it goes out earlier to patrons. So that doesn't mean it's permanently behind a paywall. And also it's $5. The lowest level is $5 a month. So that'd be $1 something a week. So it's not really a massive amount of money, but I listen, I totally respect that people are struggling out there, and I don't want anyone, and the other thing is, well, let me finish the sentence. I don't want anyone to donate if it makes them struggle. And the other thing is, I have spent the past couple of years with all of my live streams. Many people watch them. They know what I'm talking about. All the super chats and all of the donations have gone back to people who are struggling, back to, we call it a solidarity fund, and people could contact us and we would give that money back out in small portions. Whatever came in, we'd give it back out. Eleanor Goldfield and I did this. And, over that 2 years, it's well over $10,000 that we gave out to people who were struggling. And I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud I was able to do that. But that was possible because that was not funding Redacted Tonight. So now times are changed, and I've been deplatformed, and I'm trying to create a base that could allow for Redacted Tonight to exist again.
So last question, how is it working for RT America? And now that you're unemployed, can you and Primo make a show?
Nah. Well, I know people don't want to hear this. They want to hear, oh, RT America was awful, but I was given immense freedom. They, like I said earlier, they never censored me. They never told me what to say, never told me what not to say. But I do understand that the reason, and they had right-wing shows on that network that I disagreed with almost every single word they said. So you also can't say that RT had one viewpoint. But the one thing that kind of united everyone on that network was that we were all outside of the Overton window, outside of the allowable corporate thought for the most part. And that was the only thing that really united us. There were other great leftist shows like Chris Hedges, and, to some degree, Jesse Ventura. I don't know if he'd call himself a leftist, but whatever. And so there were other cool shows there, but there were also right-wing shows that I kind of laughed at how ridiculously right-wing they were. So people who thought it was one viewpoint, they probably didn't watch more than 2 minutes, and they didn't actually take the time to see what the views were on that network. But yeah, my time there was excellent, and worked with amazing fellow comedians, and created something that I think was very special. And there's so many voices. I also did an interview show on there, and there's so many voices that I won't be able to highlight anymore without a show, which, people like Julian Assange's father, and great journalists like Ben Norton and Eugene Perrier, and even people that are big, but they're censored in certain ways, like Roger Waters. And it was really amazing to have that outlet for them. But of course, the American war machine couldn't handle that. So it's all gone now.
Are you still doing comedy as well? Still touring?
Yeah, the touring has gotten interrupted by the pandemic, and then I've done a couple of shows, but it's just been tough to put together. Every time things would seem like they're starting to get back together, the pandemic would surge or whatever, and it would be tough to do it again. So I still perform, but I haven't set up a tour recently. My schedule should be a little more open coming up, so who knows? Possible.
Well, Lee, I just want to say, on behalf of everyone watching, I've been a fan of yours for years. You were an inspiration for me to do this show. So I'm going to be on the lookout for any kind of upcoming projects that you have. And once again, for folks out there who would like to follow you and support you, how can they do that?
Thanks a lot. That's really an honor to hear that. Patreon.com/Lee Camp. And yeah, even if you don't think you're going to become a member, maybe just go check it out, see what it is. And if I can get enough members, then The new version, Redacted Tonight 2.0 of some sort, will hopefully be unveiled.
Well, thanks again, Lee. I really do appreciate your time today, and hopefully I can have you back at some point in the future.
Thanks a lot. Keep fighting.